Okay, good morning, everyone. Aloha Saturday. We are thankful all of you for being with us here today. As you all know, in June 2021, about 3 months ago, the Office of Language Access have our first webinar on what they call Zoom meeting to talking about introduction about how to become an interpreter. So this is the second webinar is it related in kind of the language access series. So today we're gonna talk about the pathway to become a professional interpreter. And today we have Suzanne. First of all, I have to thank Barbara Tom, Tarina Wong from Pacific Gateway, and Suzanne from Language Services Hawaii for being with us today. But most importantly, thanks everyone for spending your Saturday morning with us to go to this true topic. This very important for all of us here. So the main speaker today is gonna be Dr. Suzanne Zeng from Language Services Hawaii with two guest speakers, Rosa and Melody Kubo from the Judiciary. So without further ado, I'll give it to Suzanne to start the presentation today. Thank you, Suzanne.
Great. Thank you so much. And some of us are still figuring out how to make your screen smaller and only see one person and only see two people. And so I understand this is can be quite frustrating, but let me go to this one person. There we go. So first of all, I want to say welcome. And this is our second in a series of quarterly workshops. The first one was back in June. And I'm going to talk about that first, but these are the three speakers that will be speaking today on our topic, Pathways to Becoming a Professional Interpreter. And AP, just out of the courtesy, first of all, just keep your camera on if possible, but now that we've started the presentation, you can go ahead and turn your camera off if you'd like. But we ask that if you want to say something that, or when it's time for discussion and the PowerPoint's over, that you actually turn your camera back on if possible. But keep yourself muted at all times unless we ask a question, then you can unmute and then mute again. And again, you can raise your hands if you do have a question, and one of the hosts will see that and will alert the one speaking that there is a question. But because at the end of each presentation, we do have a Q&A session. So we are going to ask that you hold your questions to the end, unless it's something very confusing or whatever. So it's okay. It's just, we will have a Q&A session. So probably it's best to just write down your questions and then you can ask them at the end, okay? Again, thank you, sponsors. And the first one is the one who just introduced us. We call him AP because his name is long and he's Thai, but he runs the Office of Language Access. And then Waipahu Safe Haven, Barbara Tom, who's here today, hello Barbara, is the one who really pushed this to push this workshop and training, and she knows the importance of having training. The other would be Pacific Gateway, Tarina Wong. They're actually sponsoring this. They're sponsoring this as well as Language Services Hawaii, which is where I am from, and that's my name, Suzanne Zeng. And people call me Sue. So there we go. So who else is here? Well, I already asked this question, who was here the last workshop in June, and probably less than half raised your hand. Well, who was not here. So we have a lot of newbies in this workshop, which is okay. But we did start this quarterly workshop back in June. And after that, that was like a 3.5-hour workshop. And after that, we decided that we're going to do a quarterly training for anyone who's interested. We're just going to keep going each quarter. So if you know other people who missed today, you can tell them there's one that will be coming up in about 3 months. Let's see, oops, let me get to the next one. All right, and my question is, and this is something I want to see you again, who does interpreting as your job, or at least as one of your part-time jobs, if not your full job? How many of you actually, or you do some kind of interpreting in your job or some kind of job? Go ahead and raise your hands. And you can also lift your, okay, Sophia, you can also lift your the emoji hand. Okay, I see two more. Raise your hand. Okay, very good. Thank you. Not too many of you, but probably some of you want to, and that's why you're here. Okay, and the language is spoken. I noticed I've got because I have a PowerPoint, I can't look at it all, but we have many, many, many languages spoken that are people here today. So we want to welcome you. That's great. I said to type it in the chat, but there's no need. We have the East Asian languages as well as European languages, and we also have Pacific Island languages. So we want to welcome you. Okay, let me see. All right, let's go to the next one. Now, at the last workshop in June, if you missed it, I'm going to do some brief, I guess, review, because some of you need this review. Because if you never were not here for the first one, it was called The Basics of Community Interpreting. And so it's quite important that you know what the basics are, I suppose, but that means you want to go back and watch the video, because we did record it. And so I might give some of you the link. If you'd ask me, I can give you the link of where to watch that. It's very important to get a basis before you go on to other things. So the basis is, we talked about the proper role of the interpreter. And that includes the ethics, the do's and the don'ts. We also talked about what is a competent interpreter. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And we also, what makes a competent interpreter, and how do you evaluate your own language skills? We learned how to look at our own language skills and say, hey, maybe I better improve my one of these languages. Most of us have a major language, sometimes called a mother tongue, others, but we have a major language that we speak like a native, and others, maybe our English we need to improve. Maybe it's the second language, but we can evaluate. Maybe we're very bilingual. And so we would make that's a good basis for interpreting. So you must have two languages, very fluent, in order to even begin to learn about interpreting. It's very embarrassing when the judge or somebody says, I really need an interpreter for this interpreter because I'm not understanding what she's trying to say. It's embarrassing. So we want to improve our language. The others is, we talked about useful tips for interpreters, things that you can do. And also we talked about how to know your own limitations, how to say no to a job. For example, if you're a bilingual worker and you're working in the school, and you may say, hey, I'm not ready for an IEP meeting, or but I can always help somebody register for something or fill out application forms. But to full on interpret meetings, I might not be ready yet. So knowing our limitations is very, very good in the beginning. And then hopefully you felt empowered after the last workshop. And then planning next steps on how to improve or how to become a professional interpreter. So that is why this time we're calling this Pathways to Becoming a Professional Community Interpreter. Not a conference interpreter, not a UN interpreter, but a community interpreter, because that is what is needed the most here in this community. And we will learn about what that means. But from this workshop, you're going to learn, we're going to review the proper role of the interpreter, what we talked about last time. We're also going to talk about what is a professional community interpreter and the pathways to getting there. And we're going to use established standards that are in a couple of the different categories, because community interpreter includes, various categories, but there are established standards already in the medical situation as medical interpreters, as well as court interpreters. And there are national exams and tests. So we're going to use those today to tell you how to become a medical or how to become a court interpreter, because of those standards that are set already. And then plan the next steps. So let me run right into a review of interpreter basics and what we talked about last time. We learned the difference that a translator writes, that means they have a pen and a paper or a computer. They translate from one written document to another written document. So if you need an oral translator, you need to ask for an interpreter. An interpreter is someone who listens and interprets. Of course, there are something called American Sign Language. They will listen and also interpret in sign language, but that's what an interpreter is. And that's why we call this interpreting workshops, because it's for oral interpreting. A community interpreter refers not to the United Nations, but to something like medical interpreting, court interpreting, and social services. So any kind of services that are offered, whether it be from nonprofits or from the government, these are services that we call social services. And those are what we mean by community interpreting. It's not people from the community, it's interpreters that help the community, not people going to conferences, international conferences. So that's what we mean by community interpreting. LEP, you will hear this a lot, and this word refers to limited English proficient person, individual, patient, defendant. So they're LEPs, meaning they're limited English proficient individual or person. Okay, so you're going to hear that a lot. And that's usually who we are interpreting for here in America. Their English is very limited, and so therefore they need help. How limited? Well, sometimes their English is very good. But when it comes to medical situations or in the courtroom, they may feel that they just don't have the vocabulary to understand the doctor or the lawyer or the judge. So then they're going to need an interpreter. So it's limited in some way. And also they can also be limited culturally. And what I mean by that is, we talked about this last time, you can be limited English proficiency. You can also have limited cultural proficiency. And what we mean is, maybe a lot of people, when they first come, they're unfamiliar with concepts of forms, for example. Who fills out the form? Here in America, you must be able to fill out a form. Here's an application form, then you're going to get the services. The problem is a lot of forms are in English and they're not used to filling anything out. And maybe in their homeland, it's someone in authority that fills out the form for them. You walk up to the desk and the person at the desk is the one who fills out the form by asking questions. Maybe the reading or writing skills are not that strong, even in their home language. Another example is different priorities. Sorry, turn off my cell phone. Some people feel that, family is number one, even over education. Whereas in America, a lot of times, education is number one. If there's an emergency, you must contact the Education Institute, the school, and tell them there's an emergency, therefore I won't be coming to school, for example. Whereas in other cultures, it's just known that you just put family first, for example, and you don't tell the schools or other places until the following day. So there's differences in understanding the way to do things culturally and what that means. We may think you are very irresponsible because you didn't do this, because I don't understand your culture, so therefore I judge you according to what you're doing, and then you're judging me according to what I'm doing. Why am I getting upset with you? And it might just be a complete cultural difference and nothing to do with personality or meanness, for example. Another one is different idea of times and deadlines. Some people are running late. So if your culture is someone who, that time can be very challenging, 9 o'clock doesn't really mean 9, it might really mean 9:30. Then, if you go to an interpreting meeting at a hospital and the patient's not there yet, you may want to offer to call the person at home or have the hospital call them at home, and you can interpret to see if they're coming or to see if they have a problem coming. Maybe they don't have transportation or something. So there's a lot of cultural things that also are involved when it comes to interpreting and understanding a client or a patient or a defendant. Now, when we talk about a competent interpreter, this is what we talked about last time. A competent interpreter usually are somebody who has 3 things. One is skills. They have language skills and interpreting skills. Another one is ethics. They know their role of the interpreter. They know the do's and the don'ts. They also have knowledge, background knowledge of what it is they're interpreting. So we went in a little bit detail of this last time in June, and when our previous first workshop. And the first skills we talked about were language skills. and we talked about how an interpreter determines their language skills. An A language in the world of interpreting means that you are a native speaker of that language. So English happens to be an A language for me because I'm a native speaker. I grew up speaking it, et cetera, went to school learning it. And then a B language is a near native speaker. A B language speaker will never become an A language speaker. Usually a B language is something that you learned in school, that you studied hard, or that you might have a basis of it growing up, but yet you actually went and lived in the country and you're very near native. Maybe not in terms of pronunciation, but in terms of usage. And that is what makes a very good interpreter. If you have at least one A, some of you have two A's, you're completely bilingual. You grew up in many different places, and that's considered completely bilingual. You may have two A's. Most of us don't. Most of us have one A, and our B is very, very good, like an A. Maybe it's a B plus, maybe it's a B minus. But a near native speaker means we really sound like a native, that we understand a lot of the nuances, the humor, and all of that. A C language speaker is more of a passive language. And that means a passive language speaker is somebody who, when you listen to it or you read it, you understand. But when it comes to thinking of it on your own, certain terms or way to say it, it's you stutter, you're like, how do you say this? This is, and that's the problem. That's also the problem with if you're using an A language and a C language to interpret, because as a passive language, it's not fluent. And if you're working for the United Nations or an international conference, then it's okay to listen to the speaker in the C language because you understand it, and you can interpret into an A or a B language simultaneously, for example. But in the community realm, in the community interpreting, we're going both ways all the time. We're going from A into a B, and then from a B into an A. But to use a C language, it'll be very difficult to keep up and keep the speed that we need, also the words that we need. For example, if someone said, well, he shoved me he shoved me up against the wall. He shoved me up against the wall. Now, as a limited English proficient speaker, they may not be able to express they shoved me up against the wall because they don't know the word shove. They only know the word push. And up against the wall is like meaning you're pushing actually up and then you stop against the wall. So to shove me up against the wall is very, very kind of a violent move. Now, if you're interpreting for domestic violence and you have a C language and you hear that, or you don't know how to say the words, or that you're an LEP, don't know how to say that, then it's easier for you to say that in your B or A language. Whereas in a C language, if we don't know the term shove, we may have to say push. Oh, he pushed me against the wall, not up against the wall. He pushed me against the wall is a very different idea as a listener of English, as a native speaker of English. When I hear he pushed me against the wall versus he shoved me up against the wall, very different feelings. It's a different idea. It's a different concept, and my imagination will not be that rough. And so therefore, we can't be accurate when we're trying to describe what the patient, as we're trying to interpret what the client just said. So that is why when you're interpreting in your languages, you can go from a C language into an A or B, but you really don't want to go into a C language. So you want to have an A or B. So therefore, I spend a lot of time on this because I'm really encouraging you all to study your languages and make sure you're using an A or B. And if you're a C language speaker of English, I recommend that you take some English classes and you really improve your language. Oops. Okay. So then we talked about the three modes of interpreting, or the three methods. And there's something called consecutive interpreting, where one person speaks, stops, you interpret, stop. The other person speaks, stop, you interpret, stop. So it goes back and forth, almost like a conversation. Talk, interpret, talk, interpret. And so that's called consecutive interpreting. Then we have what we call simultaneous interpreting. And in the community world, simultaneous interpreting is normally, it's when somebody's speaking and the interpreter is whispering simultaneously at the same time. So we talked about that. If a daughter of a patient answers a doctor's question in English and the patient is here not understanding the English, then what the daughter is saying, we are supposed to interpret simultaneously to the patient. So for example, if he says, well, how is your appetite? And you say, how is your appetite in the other language? And then the daughter starts answering, you know, my mom hasn't been eating very well, and I'm really concerned about her health because, you know, she's so thin. Well, we're supposed to be simultaneously interpreting that at the same time. You know, I'm very concerned because she hasn't been eating very well. And we just go into a whispered simultaneous mode. Okay. Okay, next is the sight translation. And that's when you have a written document in one language and you have to read it out loud into the second language. And here it's normally English, and we read it out loud by sight, we interpret that into a second language. We also talked about interpreters' language skills, and one of the most common skills that we need in consecutive interpreting is note-taking skills. So last time we mentioned note-taking skills, we talked about how to chunk information when you're writing, how to abbreviate the written what you hear, how to use symbols, how to use indentation, and it was very brief. But you know that there are skills that you need to learn as an interpreter. Otherwise, your memory, there's no way you can remember somebody who just goes on and on, or what the doctor says when he's giving a prescription of 2 or 3 different medicines. You need to learn how to take notes as an interpreter. We talked again about the competent interpreter, and again, skills, ethics, and knowledge. And then we spent some time last time on the last workshop talking about the ethics, the code of ethics. Every interpreter has a code of ethics. And that code of ethics is basically understanding to help us understand what our role is and to keep in that role. So when we're interpreting, we're not a friend. We don't give advice. You know, we're not there as a lawyer or to stand up or as an advocate. Our role as the interpreter is to help to facilitate direct communication between between 2 parties, not us, but between the provider and the LAP. So we want them to have direct communication. How are you today? I'm fine. And we are just the voiceover. That means we're not doing, oh, the doctor wants to know how you are. Oh, the patient says she's really, no. That means we're sticking to first person speech. If the provider says, how are you today? We say, how are you today? We don't answer the question. I'm fine, doctor, I'm the interpreter. No, he's not talking to us, talking to that means we're almost invisible. And what happens as an interpreter is that we just want them to hear our voice. And what are interpreter ethics? We talked about our standards of conduct. Another term is the standard of conduct. And I passed out a piece of paper, which I can pass out today. I will drop it in the chat. But we talked about accuracy. We talked about how important it is for an interpreter to be accurate. And we wanted to be accurate if we were in the hospital, right? Or we were seeing the doctor, or we were in the court. We want to hear accurate information, accurate interpreting. We don't want to hear their opinions. We want the interpreter to keep everything confidential. So this is one of our code of ethics: confidentiality, impartiality or neutrality. We want to make sure that we are impartial. We don't take sides. We don't help them. We don't give advice. Our proper role is just to interpret. We don't give advice. We're not lawyers. We don't take them home in our car. We don't pick them up from home. We don't become their emergency contact in the hospital. Our role is just to interpret. That's it. And so professionalism means, we talked a little bit about that, about how you dress, how you're on time, how you study further. You study before you go to a job. You're there on time at the proper time, et cetera, et cetera. So I will hand out the code of ethics to those who want it. I'll drop it in the chat a little bit later. Okay. And then again, the background knowledge is to be a competent interpreter. We need background knowledge. Now, I think a couple of days ago, maybe yesterday, can't remember, I went to do a job at the hospital. It was ophthalmology. How many of you can spell ophthalmology? I had to learn that. But I knew it was about the eye, and I had to study and create a glossary. I didn't want to just show up and not know how to say pupil or retina detachment. I need to know how to say that in my second language. So I made a glossary and then I went. So today we're going to figure out pathways to becoming a competent professional community interpreter. And therefore, I want to introduce our second speaker, Patricia Rosa Ospina. I call her Rosa. A lot of people call her Patricia, but she can, anyway, I call her Rosa. She's a nationally certified medical interpreter. She's also a nationally certified court interpreter. And yes, you can become nationally certified if you work as hard as she does and if you do the things she does. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and let her tell us how pathways to become a professional interpreter. And I think, Rosa, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and share your screen. And
hello,
really
everybody.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Let me go ahead and share my screen because I don't want to bore you and I don't want to ramble. So I made a PowerPoint to keep me on track. Let me expand my view so that I can share it. And there you go. My name is Rosa. It's also Patricia. Rosa happens to be my interpreter name, sort of. I'm a Spanish interpreter, and I am coming to you live from the Dominican Republic, which means that we have power outages here often. So I have contingency plans, but just in case I mysteriously disappear, I don't think so, but just in case, I will be back from my phone. So let's hope that doesn't happen. In my presentation, these are the things I'm going to talk about. First, I think the best way I can contribute to this workshop is by sharing my story, which basically is the path that I followed to become a professional interpreter. Then I will be sharing tips and resources on how to find jobs, how you can study, and just some brief information about certifications in case any of you eventually want to go for it. And at the end, we'll have some questions and answers. I would suggest that for the sake of time, we write them down so we can ask them at the end, because in my experience, sometimes we have a question and then a couple minutes later, the presenter answers the question with something else in the presentation. So if we save them for the very end, I think we can keep things more organized. Also, before I proceed, I just wanted to let you know that we put together a document with links of anything that I will mention here. You guys will get in either via link or as a document, so you can have a little takeaway and research on your own any and all the things that we are going to be mentioning today. So just very briefly, I will tell you part of my story. So I was born here in the Dominican Republic. This is a Spanish speaking country, but I used to travel to the United States pretty much every summer since I was very young. So by the age of 10, I had fluency, but like straight fluency, because I had never formally studied English, like in a formal English school. I took English classes, like a lot of us maybe have taken a second language class in our regular high school, for example. But other than that, I never formally studied it. But I did gain fluency since an early age. And I did a lot of self-study when I was really young by writing the lyrics of songs on my own, researching them. That was way before the internet. So I had to like do it with cassettes, pause and play and rewind. What did he say? But I definitely feel like those little things, watching a lot of movies with subtitles, helped me improve my fluency, even when I wasn't living in the US at the time. So I graduated high school. I went to university here, home in this country. I never studied in the US, and I had a career, and then I fell in love, and that guy happened to live in the US. So I packed my things and I moved. And when I moved to the United States, I kept working on my former career, which was hospitality. If any of you have ever worked in hospitality, you'll know this very demanding career, 365, 24/7. So when I was fixing to have a family, have a child, I'm like, I need a change in my life, something that's more family friendly, ideally something I can do from home. So when I was working in hospitality, there were a lot of limited English proficient employees for whom I had to be an improvised interpreter. Whenever we had training, whenever we had staff meetings, whenever there was paperwork to fill out, forms to fill out, I was an impromptu interpreter. So an improvised interpreter thrown into that role without even me knowing that interpreting was a thing. Like I didn't even know at the time that there were jobs for interpreters other than conferences. I didn't think that in regular settings in the community, in other settings, you had people that you paid to assist in communication. But I thought where there's a need, there's a way, and in my case, a way to make money, right? So I'm like, okay, maybe I can find a job related to this. And in 2012, I started looking online, just random terms, interpreting, I didn't even know that I was actually interpreter. I thought it was just translator. But like Sue clarified, it's a different thing. So I stumbled upon this job listing that they were looking for over the phone interpreters. And I applied. First thing I did was create a resume. I used all of my non-formal experience as part of my experience because I was actually doing the job and I was doing interpretation informally though. But I created my interpreter resume, listed my language skills, and got an interview. I was given a study guide to prepare. I received a phone call. It was over the phone. And it was a multi-part test. One of the parts was to interpret single terms, medical terms, from English to Spanish, Spanish to English. Everything was good because I had good command of that terminology thanks to studying that glossary. But when it came to actually interpreting the scenarios, I failed big time, which was the first time I realized like being bilingual and having all those language skills, although it's the basic element, it's not enough. You have to have more than that. You have to have interpreting skills, note-taking skills, memory. So I failed. But because I had done well in the other parts, they gave me a second chance and some tips, put them to practice, and got my first job. So I worked as a remote interpreter for a few years. Fast forward to 2018, I moved to Hawaii. And I felt like by then I had been working as an over the phone interpreter for, like I said, about 6 years. And although it was good, it was what I needed. My kids were older. I had more time and I felt like I needed my career to move forward because I felt like I had hit a plateau, making my per minute rate, but I felt like I wasn't really going places. In my language pair specifically, because every language pair has its unique situations, but in mine, the competition is tough because although there's high demand, there's a lot of offer as well. And I knew I needed something to set myself apart from the rest. And one of the ways in my language pair to do it, because like I said, other language pairs have other avenues to set themselves apart from the rest, was getting a certification. So I got my first medical certification. And a few days later, literally my life changed because this lady right here, Sue, found me in the national directory and she called me, hey, you're here in Hawaii and I see you're newly certified. And, I have an agency and this and that. And the rest is history because her call and the opportunities that came along with it were the little push that I needed to let me know that someone was seeing my efforts, that they were being noticed and that they were going to be fruitful, and that the investment, because it was expensive, the investment that I made to train for the medical interpreting course, to pay for the whole certification, which is almost $500 between registration and the two tests, it was worth it. And it was, because after I got that little validation that I needed, because I felt like I was getting lost in the crowd and I was just taking my calls and nobody would notice and I wasn't really going places like they say. But that changed literally the course of my life, of my interpreting life. The next year, I was like, I'm gonna roll here, so I'm gonna try something else. And immigration court in Honolulu were looking for contract interpreters. And the catch was they were offering free training. And I didn't think I was gonna pass their screening either, you know, being optimist, not. So I said, you know what? I eventually want to be a court interpreter. So I will take, I will go through their onboarding process, which includes free training if I pass the onboarding stages. And if I don't make it through the end, at least I'll have this training under my belt, which was really good. And it can help me see if I measure up for court interpreting, which was the next achievement that I wanted. So I went through the training, passed their screening, and then that gave me the confidence that I needed to finally aim for court certification, which was the last certification I got. And now I am getting ready to attempt to pass the federal exam next year, or at least do my first try, because that's a tough one. But in a nutshell, well, that was actually a big nut because that was kind of long. That's my story. That was the path that I took. But I want you to reflect on something. I never studied in the United States in higher education. I did a lot of self-study though, but it doesn't have to be something so unattainable. It takes time because, as you see, it didn't happen overnight. It was through the course of almost a decade. By the time I get the federal certification, if I pass the test next year, it'll be exactly 10 years since I started. So it's something that takes time to build, because if you want it, this can be a very rewarding career in every sense of the way, personally and also financially. But you have to invest time in self-study, and also eventually, if we really want to move forward and get ahead, eventually we'll have to invest even some money in courses, in training, and other things. So, as Sue mentioned, the very basic element is to have language proficiency. In this case, specifically because we are in the US, English and another language. I work for a company as a test rater. So I grade tests for candidates who want to get their first interpreting job. So like the test that I failed back then, now I am one of the raters. And one of the things that I noticed, or the main two things that I noticed people fail for, it's disparity in their languages. Because you may be really good in a second language, but maybe your English is here. And ideally they would be here, pretty close or even. And lack of note-taking technique or interpreting technique, which would be something that would cause a lot of candidates to unfortunately not pass the test. If you want to improve your language skills, there's a lot you can do on your own, especially nowadays with all the technology and the resources that we have. First advice I would give you is read anything, read a lot, read aloud. When I say anything, I mean absolutely anything. Anything from signs on doors, comic books, gossip magazines, newspapers, of course. Read even like crazy WhatsApp messages or text messages people send to each other, because there will be slang there that will, you know, that's something that we need to know. Books where there are quotes or these like idiomatic expressions that we tend to be so difficult and tricky to interpret. Watch TV. A lot of us watch TV, but you can watch TV with a purpose. If I, for example, still do, if I watch TV, any TV, I try to have either the closed caption, if it's monolingual, if it's only like a news transmission or something, because sometimes I may miss a word, but if I get to see it, you know, I will catch it. But especially if you watch Netflix or other streaming services, they have subtitles in multiple languages for many of their shows. So if you're watching an English movie, subtitle it in the other language that you need to practice or improve, or even if that's your native language. Like for me, for example, I watch a movie in English, I make the subtitles in Spanish, so that I use that, but I watch it with a purpose, and I look at the little nuances and little things that will maybe make me hesitate if I'm interpreting, and I'm getting entertained. I am, relaxing at home, but I'm also learning. YouTube is my favorite resource for learning because it's there. You can create little playlists for things that are interesting to you or things that you want to learn about. One thing that I would say, focus on 2 languages, not just one. But if you want to improve your language skills in one language specifically, well, do it more on that one. But watch YouTube in 2 languages. Find, for instance, if you want to improve your medical terminology, watch doctors that have like vlogs in English, but also look for doctors that speak your native language and watch their vlogs or their articles or whatever they have on YouTube. Watch them speaking in their native language, because there's a lot of little things that, for instance, in my case, I am a native Spanish speaker, but some concepts are native to me in English. Like for instance, an escrow account, a deductible, a burglary. Those are things that I never ever heard when I was here in the Dominican Republic, and I heard for the first time in the US. So I learned what the concept meant in English, but I never stopped to think how I would say that in Spanish until I actually had to do it. And when you're in the heat of the moment, is not the best time to be like, how do you say this? So by doing this, of watching YouTube or having things subtitled in the opposite language, whatever you watch, it's a way you can improve your language skills by not having to invest any money and even having some fun if it's something that you like. And you can also listen to podcasts. I don't really do that much, but I have colleagues that do while they're driving or doing exercise and whatnot. And they say that's another great way to keep your languages fresh. And lastly, of course, you can always take language classes. Now, to start in this career, of course, if you want to do this, it's because eventually you want to find a job in it, right? The first step, once we get it, once we establish the base that we have good command of English in another language, is to start creating your professional profile as an interpreter. So create a professional resume tailored to interpretation. Of course, list your language skills. Many of you, I bet, have at least taken some English classes or have acquired English or the other language some way, even if it's like native, like my street English that I learned. There are ways to, put that in a resume, like native like fluency in X language by living in X country for X amount of years. Even though that's not a title, it'll tell potential employers or clients how you acquired the language. Put your academic background, whatever it is, however long or short it is, put it there because it counts, it's important. And any professional experience, really think of it on your duties in terms of interpreting. For instance, I remember when I was doing my immigration court onboarding process, and I submitted my regular interpreter resume, which wasn't bad really, but the recruiter said, okay, girl, let me give you a hand here, okay? Because this is all good, but not exactly for this. So I'm like, what do you mean? My resume is great. Yes, you have to tailor it for immigration. So she was asking me, have you ever been involved in any immigration? Have you ever done any interpretation specific for immigration? And I thought, and I'm like, well, no, because for me, it was like, if you haven't interpreted in immigration court or in an immigration office, it doesn't count. But in reality, I had interpreted for immigration law teachers as a volunteer in a law school over there in Hawaii. And she's like, well, that's experience. Even though they didn't pay you, you did it. And then I'm like, well, and now that I remember, I helped interpret for a friend for their interview with an immigration officer. And she's like, well, that is experience, because you don't have to list how many times you did it unless they ask you to be super specific. But I'm talking here about creating your general interpreter resume. And I'm using this example specific to immigration, but you get the hint. You can apply this to other things. For instance, when I did my first one, I used my experience as the impromptu interpreter that I had to be at my job. I wasn't interpreting in medical settings or anything like that. And I didn't lie about that because I never claimed to be a medical interpreter. But I did perform interpreter duties, even though I was untrained and it was informal, but it was. I translated letters for them and I helped them, site translate forms. So those things are things that many of us have had to do informally. And as long as we don't lie about it, those are skills or little experiences that we can definitely sort of translate, no pun intended, into our interpreter resume. And as I mentioned, of course, volunteer experience definitely counts because it counted a lot for me for my immigration court position. So think really hard on that first step when you are creating your interpreter resume. Also, attending events like this helps because you can put, even though, if you complete a certain course on medical terminology, it may not be an interpreter specific course, but it's medical terminology. So really think hard about everything that you've done, workshop that you've attended, and make sure to put it on your resume. And once you do that, start networking. Like, again, being in an event like this, it's a networking opportunity. You get to know people. You'll definitely walk away from here with, I bet, at least one resource, one reference of something that you didn't know before you joined this workshop. So network. And how do you do that? Join LinkedIn if you haven't. It's a great resource for meeting other professionals, putting your online resume available for others to see. Like I mentioned, all these links that I'm mentioning here will be in the little sheet that you'll get for the presentation. I include there some sites where you can look for job listings using the keyword interpreter or your language even. And those are great places to start if you really want to at least start getting an idea of the jobs that are out there and the skills that they're requiring, so you can prepare yourself to apply for those. In Facebook, there are groups specifically for interpreters, translators. There are language specific groups. There are like medical interpreter groups, court interpreter groups, newly certified interpreter groups. I mean, you name it, it's probably out there. So I suggest go and ask to join them because it's a great way to stay in the know of when they're offering a free workshop here, or what's a good course for this, or people that may have questions that you may have thought of or not. And being there, it's a really good source of knowledge. Pros.com, it's I don't even know how to describe it. It's a website, but it's also like a network and a resource center because they have great terminology, glossaries. And when there's tricky terms that you have no idea how to interpret into your target language or your other language, and you have looked in dictionaries and you can't find them, probably will be there. They also advertise jobs all the time. It was actually created by a translator, I believe, a linguist. I'm not sure, translator or interpreter, but it's specifically for translators and interpreters. So I highly suggest take a look at it at least so you can become familiar. And if you have the time, eventually create a profile there. And lastly, of course, join, if you are considering it down the road, associations is another great way to have access to frequent free webinars, to have opportunities to network with other colleagues, to be part of committees, which are volunteer positions, but they're good for your resume, and you learn a lot by, being part of those organizations. Now, I don't even see the title of my slide because I moved my thing. Okay, here it is. Where is my thing? Oh my goodness. I normally do YouTube videos and it's like totally different than live. Tips to find your first jobs or clients. Okay, to ace the interview or test, one thing you must know, like Sue very wisely said, is your ethics and the standards of practice. She mentioned that she will share them, the links for the NCIHC, National Council for Interpreters in Healthcare. My goodness, that is a long name. And IMEA, I'm not even going to say that one, IMEA, let's just leave it at that. They have codes of ethics and standards of practice that were like the foundation of, at least in medical interpreting, the foundations of that sort of have the canons that we all interpreters have to follow when we interpret in the medical field. I know this is for community interpreters, but correct me if I'm wrong, Sue, I don't think we have a specific code of ethics for community interpreters as of yet. We have a court interpreter code of ethics, and we have a medical interpreter code of ethics and standards of practice, but specific for community interpreters, as far as I know, not really. They usually piggyback on the medical one, right?
Well, in Hawaii, the Department of Human Services has on its website, and they pass around actually those 5 code of ethics that I was talking about earlier, the ones that I put together, that kind of took all the code of ethics from everywhere and put it together all in 5 major categories. So, and I will send that to the chat afterwards so that everyone can have it. But it's in all the trainings, but yeah, it's no sort of national one, no.
Okay, great. But a local one, that's perfect. Okay, thank you. So definitely you need to become familiar with the ethics and standards of practice that rule the field in which you are interpreting. Some companies, even if it's a private company, I'm not talking about a like state level or a national medical certification, but in my case, like it was my experience, my first interpreting job, I had to take a test, and many companies do require testing to test your interpreting skills to grant you a contract or a job. So if you have to go through that as part of your onboarding process, review the test structure if they have a test. Study whatever materials they provide, because usually there's study guides. Like in my case, I've taken many after that, and usually all of them offer some kind of reference for you to study and practice as much as you can. I mentioned that I was going to just briefly talk about the 2 medical interpreter certifications. We have 2 national entities that offer certifications for interpreters in the healthcare field: the National Board for Certification of Medical Interpreters and the Certification Commission for Healthcare Interpreters. They're pretty similar. There are slight differences between them. Both require as prerequisites 40 hours of training specific to medical interpreting through approved courses. There are online courses available, especially more so now because of the pandemic. Many institutes have started to offer those courses online. By being certified, you will definitely have higher job placement opportunities. For all languages, there's a basic certification level. I don't want to say basic, but let's say there's one certification level, which is the HOP CMI if you go with NBCMI, and the core CHI if you go with CCHI. You get that designation after passing a written test, which is only in English. The NBCMI's test has 50 questions and CCHI's test has 100 questions. They're multiple choice, and they are questions regarding ethics and standards of practice, as well as medical terminology. Now, because of the pandemic, you can take both tests from home. So that's a unique opportunity, because I remember one of the setbacks I experienced when I moved to Hawaii back in 2017 was that I wanted to like I said, I felt like I was in this plateau, not going anywhere really. And it was time to like get ahead, do something. And I tried, and then they didn't have a testing site in Hawaii. Now it's changed. Now they do. But back then, you know, bummer because they didn't have it. But now they do have both testing sites in Hawaii. And they also offer you the chance to take the test from home. That written test costs $175. And like I said, it's available for all languages. So let's say your language is Chuukese, for instance, even though you don't have an oral test component through these two institutions, but you can at least aim to take the written test if you ever want to become certified, because this is that when they mean certified, even though this is not a full certification, this is a designation. Companies know that there's no full certification for your language pair, so you can at least aim for the one of these two, HOP CMI or Core CHI. If you are an interpreter in Spanish, Arabic, Mandarin, Cantonese, Russian, Vietnamese, or Korean, you can opt for the full certification. Check which one offers which, because they don't all offer all these languages. Some are only offered by NBCMI, and some languages, full testing is only offered by CCHI. NBCMI, you can test from home. They are the ones that offer the most languages, or the certification for the most languages. CCHI, you have to take a test in person, but they have a testing site in Hawaii, and that test costs $275. So that, including the plus the price of registration, is almost $500, only the certification portion. So you have to add on top of that whatever the cost of the course is, which can run anywhere from, I actually saw one the other day that was pretty inexpensive, $300. That was online, like self-paced, language specific, meaning it was only, I mean, language neutral. So it was only in English. But there are other courses that can cost a couple of $1,000s. Those usually are the ones that are language specific, that have mock tests and are more complete per se, and even offer some of them like more than the 40 hours that they require as minimum training. Once you achieve those steps, you will actually never stop learning, because like I just attended a workshop last Thursday, Friday, a 2-day workshop for the Florida courts, because I moved to Florida. I am still studying for the federal exams, and I still have to study whenever I go to an assignment, because, you know, there's people, like in my case, I'm a Spanish interpreter, there's Spanish spoken in 20 some countries. So I have to brush up on my terminology and the specific like regional expressions from X or Y country, depending on the language that the LEP person that I'll be interpreting for speaks. So never stop learning, keep taking courses, keep attending workshops like this. I mean, it already says a lot about you if you're here. It already says that you're taking a Saturday to be here to learn all these things. There's a lot of free opportunities to learn, like this one and many others that are now popping up because of the pandemic. I guess people are being so kind, I guess. I don't know. Always prep for your assignments. Please keep making us look good. Keep us looking professional. Always show up on time, you know. Gather information about the assignment ahead of time. Like Sue, I mean, she's so great. She just gave the perfect example. Gather glossary specific for the assignment that you're going to go attend to, and always look for resources to keep expanding your knowledge. And that was basically it for me. I will stop sharing now so we can go to the questions. Are there questions in the chat that I missed? I really don't.
No, I don't think there's any questions in the chat, but you can, I did put resources that Rosa just shared with us in the chat. You can just download it. It's a PDF file. But those of you interested, especially in medical interpreting, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question. We'll spend some time doing this.
I have a question, Sue. Sorry, I don't mean to take up your time, but you know, when they take the written test, and a lot of these folks, you know, may only be eligible for the written test, do they get some form of certification after they pass the written test? You know, like certified for written only.
You will get a certificate
Yeah,
that says your designation, which would be Hub CMI if you do it with the NBCMI,
yeah,
and the Core CHI if you do it with the CCHI.
okay. And does that make you eligible if ever the oral test should become available? Does that make you eligible for the oral test? And by showing proof that you've completed the written?
I am guessing so, because if your language is one of the few languages for which there is an oral test, you actually have a certain amount of time for you to take the oral test. It's a mandatory step to go all the way. You cannot just say, I mean, you can if you choose to, but you're basically going to waste your money, because what happens is, let's say I'm a Spanish interpreter and I go for the written test. I'll get my initial designation as Core CHI Hub CMI. But then I say, you know what? I'm kind of chicken. I don't feel ready or whatever. I'm not going to go for the oral test. And I let the time pass. There's a time limit. I'm not too sure. I think it might be a couple of years, but I would have to research it to be sure. But anyway, there's a time limit for that. If I don't take the oral test by then, it's not like I can go ahead and renew my Core CHI or Hub CMI status. I would have to start the process all over again, and then, you know, retake the written test, and again the clock would restart for me. But if I am a Chuukese interpreter and there is no oral test for me, I would take the written test. I would not have that time limitation to, or that, you know, mandatory time to take the oral test, because there isn't any, but I do have to renew my certification within that time. And I can continue having that status as of, you know, but opposed to the languages for which there is, they would lose that status or that designation if they don't go for the oral test. So it's mandatory to go all the way eventually within the time set if there is an oral test for you or language.
All right, thank you, Rosa. That was it.
You're welcome.
And again, the emphasis of the oral test is medical. It's a little bit of ethics as well, depending on which test you take, but it's medical information, it's health information, and it's not easy. I mean, you really have to study. You have to know the difference between alveoles and bronchial, you know, things like that. So you really do have to study, and it's all in English.
Rosa, I have a question. My name is Della Nakamoto. I live on Maui. I'm hoping to be a Marshallese interpreter. I really, your journey is, I love that you really wanted to make sure that you pronounce the words correctly. And that's what I used to do. You cassette tapes, you rewind, you write the lyrics, you try to mimic the word so that you pronounce it exactly as you hear it. So that, great journey. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to know, of course, my day job, I'm an insurance agent. What kind of insurance requirements? If you're a professional interpreter, are you required to provide proof that you have general liability insurance or errors and omissions insurance? Are you required to carry those?
As far as I know, in almost 10 years doing this, Requirement, no, but there are options like errors and omissions, which is usually what translators have. I think it could apply for interpreters as well. But now you've made me think about it, because I'm like, maybe I should get that insurance.
You
But
should get that.
I know, but required per se, not as far as I know. No.
Okay. You know, I'm just curious.
I can answer,
I'm
and I
sorry,
can
go
answer
ahead.
that question if you'd like.
Thank you.
There are companies, if you sign with organizations, they do require it. They require at least professional liability insurance. And so, for example, all of the contracts we have with the hospitals and various agencies, even government agencies, they require it of the large companies, the language service provider companies. And what we try to do is try to cover the interpreters, although it won't completely cover them because they are independent contractors. But it will, if someone ends up suing us for miscommunicating something, they could sue the interpreter, they could sue the company, they could sue like the hospital if it was a hospital, they could clump them all together. The interpreter, because usually they probably won't have much money, then the lawyers don't like to go after those who don't have much money. They will go after the language service providers. So we have to make sure as a service provider, we have all of the insurance that they ask for. That's why a lot of interpreters like to work for language service providers rather than individually, unless it's something that is not so, risk-taking, I suppose. But if you do go through language service providers, then they do have those kinds of insurance, and it should technically cover them. At least we're very honest with our companies who does what. Yeah, so that's we have a lot of insurance as an agency.
Thank you. That's good to know. I mean, because I insure, it's so similar to like legal firms and real estate firms. So, I always look for that endorsement that says we will insure our independent contractors, because if I want to be protected. If I make an error, if I make a mistake, or I forgot something and I missed something, then I want to make sure that I'm protected against anyone that I'm going to be an interpreter for. So, and I think that it's important for everyone, even if no one is requiring that of you, you have to think that you want to protect yourself in the event that you're dragged into a lawsuit because of your error or your omission. Okay, thank you. Great story.
And that's a very good question. And it's not cheap. As an individual interpreter, it's really costly to put together. Unless you're making good money, it's tough to kind of fork out that kind of funds. Once you start getting, very professional, like a lot of the sign language interpreters, they're busy every single day, all through the day, and they actually, support each other in buying that kind of insurance. The other thing is that is one reason why, like with our company, we're very picky on who we hire. We're very, very picky on the code of ethics. Because if they're breaking the code of ethics, that makes us liable. It might leave us open to lawsuits. So that's why we're extremely picky on who we hire. And so going through the route that Rosa went through to educate yourself and to take the test, and that, I just knew, once I knew she had taken that test and passed, I knew she knew a lot of things that go into actually taking a test like that. There's a lot of people who are excellent interpreters did not pass, but definitely it's attainable. Other questions?
Yes, so we have some couple questions on the chat asking about taking oral tests. So I just want to make sure when we talk about here what Rosa said, if we talk at about national level, which is what Rosa says, CSI and the CMI. So there are only certain languages that they they provide with the oral interpreter. Oral test. I'm gonna share with you for the group real quick. This is for CSI. They only have 3 languages for the oral test, which is Arabic, Mandarin, and Spanish. And for the CMI, they have, I believe, 6, which is Cantonese, Korean, Mandarin, Russian, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So this is the only oral test that they provide at the national level. But also what Sue mentioned in the chat, there are also some like a local level, but it's not these two organizations. Yeah, you mentioned that they have Shookies and Marshallies for the local market. I mean, local agency like in Hawaii. So that's going to be separate level. So, but it ready, but it's not offered yet. Is that right? Because
Yeah,
the question is
that-
there, who can contact?
Yeah, who can contact? Okay, that's a good question. Actually, the Chookies and the Marshallese were offered to the national board of the certification of medical interpreters. So we offered that test to them. So what they said is that if it's a locally recognized, they would actually recognize it and put it into another category, also called certified interpreter. But they would say they would add a word like I forgot what they said they would do. So right now it's just a matter of assessment. It's not really ready to give, but we wanted to do it on a national level versus just local level. And that's why the Chookies and the Marshallese are already recorded. Everything's ready to go. It's just, it'll still be about a year or so before that's given. But it's the same level of test. It's a very difficult test orally.
I would say as one thing as what they call me, Sue, and a lot of stakeholder working on try to pushing to expand more. It's just about showing the demand. So like we are here as a group, like I say, 80% of us here today is not using English as a first language. So if you know that there is a demand, there is a need, you need to show, because when people developing something, we're looking from business perspective as well as the user's perspective. If we don't have the demand, that's why the supply is going to be very low, even about the language access. So it's just, I would say it's fall on us because we are an expert in the area. We are the one who create, who helping with the users. So it's very important. Just voice your concern, put it on your demand, so we can see as a community as a whole how we can expand that to cover. And one thing that we have to remind ourselves that Hawaii is very unique. Whatever languages that we hear, it might not be a high demand for the what they call around the US. So we are a really small voice in the middle of the Pacific, but we can make our voice to be heard. So just keep pushing. It might take time, like Rosa said, it takes her about a decade before her can come to this area. So like I said, it might not happen today, but we're just building foundation and pushing for the better of our community. So I'll just stop there. I'll give it back to Sue.
Thank you. Well, we are out of time. We're going to move on to court interpreting, and it might bring up a lot more questions because first of all, we want to thank Patricia Rosa, for a wonderful presentation. And again, I gave you some of the resources that she put together. So yeah, we do thank you. Yay. And I know she may have to go because it's very late over there in the Dominican Republic, but we really appreciate you taking the time, especially from visiting family. So thank you, Rosa. And now we're going to move on to court interpreting and legal interpreting. And we're very lucky. I saw that Debbie also signed up, but I'm not sure if she's here, but we have Melody Kubo. And let me pull up Melody. She is actually from, does it say where you're from? Okay, so let me explain where she's from. Melody is from, I'm going to share my screen real quick so that you can see it. Here we go. She is from the Hawaii State Judiciary Office on Equality and Access to the Courts. She and Debbie, a lot of you heard of Debbie Tuleng da Silva, but their office is in charge of the interpreter program for the state of Hawaii in the state Hawaii courts. And so now we're going to turn it over to her and see pathways to becoming a court interpreter. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and unmute yourself, and I'm going to pull up your PowerPoint.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Sue. So hi, everybody. Thank you for sharing your Saturday with us. This is a little hard act to follow there, Rosa. But so actually I have a really short presentation because a lot of what I was going to say, Sue and Rosa have already covered. But I did want to start with a little quick quiz. So if you can click two more slides, Sue. A lot of people think that they know what court interpreters do, and maybe you do and maybe you don't, but let's take a little time to see what court interpreters really do. So how much do you know about court interpreting? So the first question, and you don't have to answer, just answer in your you know, in your head. Which of the following skills is least important in court interpreting? Memory, B is bilingualism, C is native accent, and D is intelligence. What do you guys think? Okay, and the skill that is the least important is your native accent, right? So next question, are court interpreters have an obligation to A, make sure the defendant understands everything that is going on in the trial? B, inform the court if the attorney's question is likely to be too difficult for the defendant to understand? C, interpret everything just as it is said without explaining or simplifying? D, explain legal concepts to the defendant? E, all of the above is not an answer. So what do you guys think? I see A, I see B. And the correct answer is C, in court. Court interpreting is a very unique situation for interpreters, because unlike interpreting in the community or in medical, you really have to be very neutral. So we are not able to, in the court, explain anything to the defendant. We're not able to explain things to the court like, oh, this person, he may not understand the way you phrase the question. That's outside of the interpreter's role in court. So very different than some of the other situations you may interpret in. Okay, last question. The interpreter may give legal advice. A, in a limited way under certain circumstances. B, never under any circumstances. C, when the defendant explicitly asks for help. Or D, when the defendant is indigent. And the correct answer is B, never under any circumstance. So this again is very different than perhaps in your community interpreting scenarios where you can be a little more of an advocate. In court, you're basically just a language machine. So very, very neutral. And it's because of the, you know, the importance of the court proceeding. So like it has been said before, court interpreting is more than just being bilingual. It is a profession and it requires you to develop specialized skills. But it is a way for you to use your language skills in a way that puts your second language first. Okay, next slide. So what are some of the benefits of being a court interpreter? Well, you get to use your language skills that you already have to help your community. You have flexibility in your jobs. Most of our interpreters, all of our interpreters at the court are not staff. They're hired on a per assignment basis. So you have the flexibility to accept or decline as your schedule permits. And you make pretty good pay. So at the court, we start at $25 an hour for a minimum of 2 hours. So we guarantee you 2 hours of pay. Which is pretty good, and that beats, you know, my first job, which was at Walmart or something, where I made minimum wage. So interpreting can actually be fairly rewarding financially if you want to take it that way. Okay. A lot of times people will say, so I want to be a court interpreter, but is there any job for me? Am I going to get any assignments? So in fiscal year 2018, which ended in June 30th, 2018, the judiciary provided interpreters in 11,300 some odd cases. That's 11,000 hearings that we actually paid for an interpreter to be in court to help somebody. Okay, we paid for interpreters in 41 languages that year. We paid out $842,000 in interpreting services costs. So that includes direct payments to interpreters as well as travel costs if you travel to the neighbor islands. But most of that payments went straight to our interpreters that we use in the court. Okay, these are our top 15 languages, what we call our top 15 high demand languages in the court in fiscal year 2018. Our number one most frequently interpreted language was Chuukese. Our number two is Ilocano. Our number three was Marshallese. Our number four is Korean. Number five is Spanish. Okay, this is statewide data. So on the neighbor islands, each neighbor island has a unique community and they have unique needs. So in Maui, for example, Spanish may be their number one. Um, in Kauai, they have more of the Filipino languages. So each community or each circuit, the needs reflect the community that is there. Okay, but overall, I have to say that for the past maybe 10 years that I've been with the judiciary, these five languages have pretty much been in the top five. They just kind of shuffle around a little bit. But Chuukese has been our number one language for a very long time. Okay, and we don't have nearly enough interpreters in any of our languages that we can say that we're always looking for good interpreters, people who want to come and interpret for the courts. Of course, this is because, in Hawaii, we have a very high percentage of our population that is limited English. We have a high percentage of our population that is immigrant. And that's demonstrated by the makeup of this class. I mean, most of you don't speak English as a first language. And so, because of the makeup of our population, we see that there are higher needs for interpreters and then more opportunity for you. Okay. So let's take a look at what court interpreters actually do. So what I want to say first is that interpreters play a critical role in our courts because they help us to provide access to justice. Because when somebody comes to court and they don't speak English well, they still have the right to participate in their hearing, to communicate, tell their story to the judge, to be able to understand what is being required of them so that they can comply and get out. So court interpreters are very important because they are the ones that bridge those communication gaps for our LEP court users and parties. And what they do in court is put the LEP person in the same position as an English speaking person in court. That doesn't mean that the LEP person gets a full explanation of all that legal terminology, but it does mean that they have the right to hear everything that is said in English in their language. Okay. So court interpreters in court can help the limited English party hear evidence, participate in their court hearing, confront witnesses, and communicate effectively with the court, attorneys, and probation. Okay. So what is the interpreter's role? So the interpreter's role is basically to facilitate direct communication between two or more persons who do not speak the same language. I know Sue showed you this slide earlier because we great minds think alike, but basically this is what we do in court, right? The interpreter's role in court, next slide, is to convert everything that is said in one language into the other language and vice versa. Adding, changing, summarizing, omitting nothing. So basically your job as a court interpreter is to take whatever is said in English, translate it as accurately and completely as you can into the other language, take whatever the defendant says in that language and translate it as accurately and completely as you can into English. Okay. In court, we do have our own code of court interpreter ethics. It is established by Supreme Court rule for here in Hawaii. And it basically covers the 5 areas that Sue had mentioned before, which is accuracy, confidentiality, impartiality or being very neutral, role boundaries, and being professional. Okay, so to be in court, we will use 3 modes of interpreting. So we expect all of our interpreters to be working towards mastery of all 3 modes. Okay, sight translation is something that is very important in court. Next slide. Sight translation is when you take a form in English and you read it aloud into Chuukese. So obviously we use this a lot in court when defendants need to sign waiver of jury trial forms or change of plea forms, or they understand the terms and conditions of their release. All of those documents are sight translated to the defendant. Okay. Then we also use consecutive and simultaneous. So simultaneous interpreting is used a lot in court because this is where the interpreter interprets the message at almost the same time. And it's used to make sure that the limited English proficient person is hearing everything that is being said in the court in their language without having to slow down the proceeding. So if the judge is talking to the attorney is talking to the judge, that the interpreter will be interpreting that simultaneously so that the LEP defendant can hear it in their language, but it's not going to slow down the court process. Okay. When the court addresses the defendant directly, for example, if they're asking the defendant questions or he's testifying on the witness stand, then the interpreter would switch into consecutive, because consecutive is where one person speaks, the interpreter interprets. The other person speaks, the interpreter interprets. So basically that is used primarily for when the court is going to address the defendant directly and only one person can be speaking at a time. That is also because in court, the interpreter becomes the record. Okay, in court, we record everything that happens in any proceeding. And when the person who is testifying doesn't speak English, the interpreter's English rendition of their words becomes the record. That's the official record. So that is why we use consecutive there. Okay. So given that that's the job of the court interpreters in court, what skills do you think our court interpreters need to have? Well, clearly, and it has been said before, you need to have mastery of both English and your non-English language with near native fluency. You need to read and write your both languages. You need to be understandable in both languages. So a few years back, we did a project where we actually tested our interpreters in English, spoken English, for free. We found out that a portion of our interpreters that we qualified to be in court failed the spoken English test. They didn't achieve the cut score. So we offered them the opportunity to take a online accent reduction course if they wanted to work on their accent. And we paid for that. Okay. That is really important because sometimes if your accent is too strong, the judge is not going to be able to understand you. And then the judge is going to say, I need an interpreter for this interpreter. So just to be mindful that as you're working on your skills, that is really important. Okay. Other skills. The interpreters need to know all three modes of interpreting because at different times during the court proceeding, you will need to use the three skills. Okay, you will need to interpret in different registers. Court is a very formal place. Attorneys use highfalutin legal terminology and sophisticated words, but defendants and other people in the court may talk in pidgin English, may use different slang, may use different sentence construction. You need to be able to interpret the lawyer talk and then the witness talk. So we need to know different vocabulary, different slang, different levels of language, and you need to be able to duplicate the speed and pacing of the speaker because your voice again becomes that person's voice. So if you hesitate or you add pauses in your interpretation, it affects the credibility determination, how people look at that defendant and feel about what they're saying. Yeah. Other skills then to be able to do all of that: concentration, memory, note taking, multitasking skills. Okay, I've been told that I went to a defensive driving class once, and the teacher said that drivers can only do two things. They can only be thinking of two different things at one time. So the point was not to get distracted when you're driving because we can only do two things with our brain. And I said, my understanding is that interpreters do like 23 things with their brain all the time because they're always listening and translating in their head and then spitting it back out. he didn't really buy that from me, but I thought that was kind of a interesting little side note that, you know, we are better than defensive drivers. In addition, interpreters need to be professional because you are independent contractors. You need to take responsibility for billing, for arriving on time, for presenting yourself as a professional. It affects your credibility and how others perceive you and other interpreters. Okay, interpreters need to be flexible because they're independent contractors. Sometimes the defendant might not show up today, but maybe another defendant showed up next door and they need you next door. You need to be able to switch gears and go to that one if we need you to do that. Okay, and again, you need to be willing to learn. So what I want to say is that court interpreters, you don't need to know anything about court or the law to want to come to be a court interpreter. We are going to teach you what you need to know. What you do need to be is willing to learn, willing to put in the time to learn the terminology, willing to put in the time to practice your skills so that you can be successful in this venue. Okay. I have a 30-second pitch and plea. That's a video. Okay, did that work?
Sorry, I need to unmute. Did you hear that? Did everybody hear that? If not, I need to share my, I'm so sorry, I forgot. I have to share my volume, my sound. So hold on.
Yeah, no, I don't think we heard it.
Okay, I'm going to share my sound. Here we go. How about now?
Hawaii's judiciary system is
Good? You hear it? No?
Yes. Yeah, we heard it.
Okay, here we
You
go.
guys hear it? Okay. I didn't see
finding
it,
itself
but I heard
in a
it.
unique and
You don't
difficult
see it?
situation.
Mm-mm.
Oh, then let me, thank you for letting me know. Hold on. I will share this. I think I have to just switch the sharing. I'll share this one. Okay, I think it's this one. Okay, here we go.
Hawaii's judiciary system is finding itself in a unique and difficult situation these days. There's a shortage of court interpreters statewide. As KITV4's Jill Kuramoto reports, there's an immediate need for bilingual residents to work in the courts.
All right. Meaningful participation in your own trial is a civil right.
We would be asking that it be dismissed with prejudice.
Ma-dismiss ko man with prejudice.
That goes for even non-English speaking defendants.
Kanay mga datoy-datoy, Mr. Paila.
But with Hawaii's diverse ethnic population, a lack of qualified interpreters in the court system is a case proving hard to solve.
Well, it's a huge problem.
Right now, there are 300 court interpreters employed with Hawaii's judiciary system, covering 40 different languages. But there's a high demand for Chuukese, Ilocano, and Korean-speaking interpreters.
Court interpreting requires a highly specialized skill in 3 different modes of interpreting.
On top of having strong language and written skills, court interpreters are held to a higher standard.
So they have to have strong moral and strong ethical character.
It's not easy at all.
Suzanne Zeng is a Chinese interpreter with more than 10 years working in Hawaii's courts.
星期三10点钟没问题. You have to think accuracy and how do you say this certain word or term or phrase in another language. Sometimes we have to hold back tears ourselves, and other times we have to hold back anger maybe. But yes, you have to be very unbiased.
But Zeng will tell you the reward is always when justice is served. Jill Kuramoto, KITV4 News.
Applications for court interpreters are being accepted until February 1st. Salary ranges from $25 up to $50 an hour. A link to the information on the program is on our website, kitv.com.
Okay, so that was actually a story from a prior year, but the information still stands. Okay, we are always looking for good interpreters who are willing to come and learn about if they're at all interested in being a court interpreter. Like I said, you don't need to know anything about court or the law because we are going to train you. So in order to be a court interpreter, we set up a program where now we train and screen all of our interpreters before we put you into court. So we are not anymore going to just throw you in there. We will actually give you the knowledge and resources that you need to be able to successfully interpret in court. Okay, so the requirements to be a court interpreter: you need to be 18 years of age, authorized to work in the United States, speak English and another language, agree to abide by our professional code of conduct, and submit a program application. When you submit the program application, which is available online on the judiciary's website, then we put you on our mailing list, and then we will notify you when we schedule our basic orientation workshop. So this is the first of 3 mandatory requirements that all of our interpreters must meet before we can put you into court. This is a 2-day, sorry, Sue, next one, 2-day workshop. So we usually do it Saturday, Sunday. We do it in every circuit. We go to Hilo, Kona, Maui, and Kauai. And in the neighbor islands, we'll do 2 days during the week. We talk about the state court system, courtroom procedure, how do you act in court, what is the protocol. We talk about legal terminology, a lot about ethics and the role of the interpreter. We give you an overview of the 3 modes of interpreting. Our interpreter trainers will teach you how you can work on your skills at home after the training so that you can get better. They will teach you introduction to note taking, tips on how you can build your memory skills. And then we conclude the 2 days with next steps in the certification program. If you decide that you want to pursue being a court interpreter, then the next steps that you would take in our program. Okay, assuming that you do want to come in and pursue being a court interpreter, then the next step would be we have 2 written exams. These are multiple choice exams in English that are given approximately 2 months after the basic orientation workshop. And again, we would come out to you. We come out and do it in every circuit. The exams cover interpreter ethics. And the other test is what we call a written English proficiency exam. It is a national exam developed by the National Center for State Courts for state court interpreters. So the National Written English exam covers your knowledge of English, written English, synonyms, antonyms, idioms. The other half of the exam covers your knowledge of legal terminology, courtroom procedure, and court interpreter ethics. Okay, assuming that you pass both of those exams, then the last thing that we do is a state-based criminal background check we do in our office. And once you have cleared that, then you will become a Tier 1 registered interpreter. At that point, you are qualified for court assignments, and you are going to be making $25 an hour if you do get an assignment. We do guarantee you 2 hours base, which means that if you are in court for traffic, arraignment and plea, and you get dismissed after half an hour, you still get paid for 2 hours. Okay, you are also listed on our court interpreter registry, which is posted on the judiciary's website. And currently, we are the only state agency that posts a list of interpreters that have been screened, trained, and tested for the public's use. So a lot of other agencies use interpreters from our list. So police department, public defenders, prosecutor's office, housing appeals, welfare appeals, unemployment, they will usually look at our list and try to call interpreters off our list. So it's another way for you to get assignments, paying assignments, is to get on our list. Okay. So I took out the slide, but let me just take a minute to say, once you have attained Tier 1 as an interpreter in our program, you are then eligible to take an oral exam in your language if it exists. So Hawaii does belong to part of the National Center for State Courts Council on Language Access, which basically NCSC and the states together have developed a bank of oral and written testing specific to court interpreters. Currently, the oral exams are available in 19 languages that lead to certification. And because it's based on national need, the languages range from things like Spanish and Russian to Somali and Haitian Creole, which we don't see here. Unfortunately, because it is based on national need, a lot of our Asian Pacific Islander languages are not represented in the oral exam for certification land. Um, However, we in Hawaii have tried to develop alternative testing that we can recognize to give speakers of Asian Pacific languages for which there is no other oral exam. We can give you recognize you as a higher qualified interpreter. So we used to recognize the line bridge exam that they used in immigration court. And if you took that test and passed it for immigration court, we would give you a higher tier, you get a higher pay rate, and you get called first. So we are currently looking to expand our list of credentials that we recognize for reciprocity. But know that even if there is no oral exam in your language for certification, that there may be an avenue for you to take an oral exam at some point that gets you a higher qualified, a higher tier rate, and gives you a credential. Okay. We do not require our interpreters to take an oral exam, even if it does exist. So it is entirely up to you. Our program is very self-directed. There are no time limits. There is no, you have to go from taking the written to taking the oral in 2 years. We don't believe in that. We do want to encourage you to do that, but we didn't want to put in requirements like that. Okay, so with that, I do want to talk a little bit about resources for court interpreting, because even if you are interested today, I have to be honest, our workshops are normally not scheduled until February and March each year. So there's about a few months that you can work on your skills individually. Okay, so the first thing I want to point you to is what we call self-assessment. So self-assessments are little quizzes that will help you determine whether you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be a court interpreter. Would you be able to succeed in this venue? The one I particularly found that I liked was this one from Massachusetts, and I did provide Sue with a list of resources with links that she can provide to you after this training. But among the questions on one of these assessments, beyond do I communicate fluently in English and the other language, will I be able to interact with interpreter colleagues effectively? Do I have a good memory? Do I have the ability to speak clearly and loudly in public settings? Will I be intimidated if I have to go to court? Can I think and act calmly during emotional situations? I mean, these are the kinds of things that you are going to have to deal with as an interpreter. So these questions are actually pointing you to some of the things that maybe we didn't think about when you were thinking about what interpreters do in court. Okay, so I encourage you to take a look if you're at all interested and go through the self-assessment questions. There are a number of them out there. These are just two that I found. Yeah. Okay. Another thing that we find is probably the best thing you could do is to go to court and watch court. How many people have ever been to court for anything? Traffic ticket, anything? Okay, so every year when I do the bow, there's a number of people in the class that say, I have never been to court. Okay, you should go to court, because that's the best way to learn about interpreting and court procedure is to sit and watch court hearings. So the one that I encourage people to go to is the arraignment and plea, traffic arraignment and plea, or criminal arraignment and plea in district court. And in those hearings, you will very likely see interpreters, because those are our high demand courtrooms. And because of COVID, you now can go and watch them online from the comfort of your own home, and you don't even have to come to the courthouse anymore. So I did provide you with links to the First, Second, and Third Circuit Zoom meeting numbers, so that you can pick and choose if you want to kind of just pop in and out and watch some of the court proceedings. You may not be able to figure out exactly what's going on at first, but if you sit and watch for 15 minutes or so, and particularly if you are in courtroom in Honolulu 7C or 7B, you will probably see an interpreter at some point in your half an hour if you stay there.
Of course, with COVID right now, it may not be possible, but it will be opening up, I hope, soon.
Yeah.
Or you can do the
So
Zoom thing.
you
Yeah,
can do the Zoom. And then if you do come to the BAO, we try to, especially on the neighbor islands, we try to go to it where they have International Day, where they have a lot of their interpreter proceedings come in on one designated day. So we try to time our training so that we hit International Day, we go as a class and we get to watch different interpreters interpret. And that's always fun. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do it next year. But in the meantime, feel free to check out the Zoom hearings. Okay, the other thing I want to point you to is what is called a resource guide for court interpreters. This was developed by the National Center for State Courts, the people who developed the written and oral exams. So the resources that they are pointing you to are all online, and they can help you to develop the knowledge and skills that you're going to need to be in court. And they do update this. This was just updated, I think, last year or the year before. So they do periodically update to make sure that the links are good, but these are legal focused from other courts. So very, very tailored to what court interpreters are going to need to know and what you're going to need to know to be successful in this environment. Okay. And of course, if you have any other questions, feel free to call me. Call me or call my staff. We are here for you and we are your people. So if you have any questions after this training about what interpreters do or how you're not sure about what the demand might be in your language or how much the training costs, call me and we can chat. Okay. And then I think I've taken up all my time. So if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. If not, I'm going to turn it back over to Sue.
Don't be shy. If you have any question, Melody is here. And I just want to say that since 2018, the Office of Language Access and Judiciary have become a partner in providing what I call the basic orientation. And now because of the COVID situation, we would not be able to do in person, but we're still in discussion how we're gonna resume that back. So just give you some opportunity to think about it. Like Melody say, one way to do some assessment to see, are you ready to be an interpreter? Just go on that link to see. Because for me as a lawyer, I know I cannot be an interpreter because a lot of time I intend to inject my legal opinion in there, because that's why I know I cannot maintain my neutrality, because as a lawyer sometimes, oh, they say that at the last hearing, why they say this at the last hearing. So I would say I have like my own bias certain times. So that's why I just kind of screen myself. I just be a lawyer, not being an interpreter. So because I cannot maintain that type of role, because like being a what they call interpreter is a professional. As a lawyer, we need you to help us communicate with the people who cannot speak English. So you are like breathing our communication. So you are very important. So if you interested, become a court interpreter, like the video said that we are in needed. And I would say as a lawyer, and also now working at the Department of Health, I also have a privilege to see both sides, medical interpreter as well as the legal interpreter. We need your help. We need all of you to like I say, considering becoming an interpreter, not just helping yourself, but also helping our people, helping our community. And there is a lot of opportunity out there. Just take the opportunity, and we are here to support. Yeah. Okay, that's my dialogue. Any question for
Thank
Melody or
Yeah,
Sue?
we have
or
about
Mark?
1 or 2 minutes. We may go a few minutes over time. So any questions about court interpreting that you want to ask? And I did just upload all 3 resources. So you can go to the chat, you can download those. And they're asking if we can email those attachments. And
yes, I can. I will. So can you email me that resource?
yeah,
And then
we will email those 3 attachments. Okay, very good. Any other questions? Yeah.
Can I ask a question again?
Yes.
Sorry. I wanted to know from Melody, what is the needed languages as far as interpreters that you're needing for the courts? And the second question is, because they're doing a lot of the courts virtually, can the interpreters be doing interpretation virtually?
Okay, so in answer to your first question, Barbara, we are always looking for interpreters in all languages. We are
Okay.
especially short, however, of our Pacific Islander languages. We are trying to build our pool of Marshallese interpreters on Oahu, Pompeian and Yapese on Maui. But we will take interpreters who speak any language in any island, because this is a really good training. It really is a good training. If you are like, we at one point we were trying to get a lot of military spouses. So I had a woman who speaks Swahili, which is an African language. She will probably never get an assignment here in Hawaii, but she can take what she does with us to her next duty posting, and the credentials will travel with her.
Okay.
So we do accept any language spoken, um, but we do obviously struggle with some of our Pacific Islander and some of our Asian languages as well. Okay. The second question was, COVID has been, in a sense, a little bit of a blessing for our interpreters, because what used to happen when we required interpreters to come in person was they would have to go to the courthouse. And then if we couldn't find somebody on Maui who spoke Marshallese, for example, we would have to fly somebody over from Oahu. Okay, so that would take a whole day out of their day. We would have to pay them $500 for the flight and their travel time, and it was a big, disruption. So with COVID and the courts moving to doing more of the proceedings remotely by video conference, it's actually given our interpreters the opportunity to have more assignments, because now you're not limited to the assignments on your island. You could actually be contacted by a court on another island, in another circuit, or even we are even using some of our interpreters who moved out of state sometimes when we need them, where we wouldn't have been able to use them before. So, in a certain sort of way, COVID has been good for our interpreters in that it's broadened the potential of assignments, the potential galaxy of assignments that's available to interpreters. Um, so yes, we do. Yes.
And any other questions? And I know Rosa was actually our first interpreter to ever test to a tier 6, the highest tier that we have, to actually test into it. So she's very familiar also with the testing that it takes and things. Maybe next time we can ask her to go more detail. But feel free to answer some of the questions as well, Rosa. So is there any other questions? We'll have one more question. You can type it in if you'd rather.
Yeah. If you guys have questions specifically that you want to just call me after and ask, my phone number is on the PowerPoint slide. And I guess Suki can put it in chat. No?
I put it in chat already.
Okay.
It's there. So you can grab it from the chat and her email as well. Anybody? It's fun to watch court, especially on Zoom.
I have a question. Sorry. So to be a court interpreter, do you have to sign up with Sue? Do you provide interpreters to the court, or
no? Melody just explained they have a court interpreter
just
program.
their own people that
their own people. It's a 2-day
I see.
workshop, and you go through their program and you can get on their list, and it's direct.
And Melody, so same question that I asked Rosa earlier, do you require your independent contractor to provide some type of insurance like general liability or errors and omission?
We do not currently require our interpreters to carry insurance.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to let you know, if there are challenges to interpreting, there's other avenues that the court has that they can go rather than suing them with sues. They just have a mistrial
Just
or something
checking.
like that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, guys. If you do think of other questions after this training, feel free to give us a call. We are always here for you. And I hope to see some of you at my next basic orientation workshop next year.
Thank you very much, Melody. Let's give her a hand. I know nobody can hear that,
Melody.
but we appreciate it. So this workshop actually is coming to a close. I know some of you are saying, oh, is there any way I can watch it? But you were here, and it's really, you took out the time, you did it here. That was awesome. I might give you a link. I think I will put the link in the bottom to the first workshop, because if you did come to this one, I think that there's no reason why you can't watch the second one. So it's, you know, we want to reward you for doing that. So I'll go ahead and put it in. Any closing words that anyone needs to say, in particular, Tarina or AP or Barbara, anything?
I just want to thank everybody for coming to today's workshop. I see that we missed a lot of people at the workshop, but we're going to continue this every third month, yes, to try and create something for the community. And we hope that you can pass along the information that we send out to you about the workshops, so we can get more folks to attend these workshops. Our goal is really to kind of try and develop a community of interpreters that we can utilize for the community's sake. So thank you very much for attending today's session.
And I did want to say that we are in discussion with the community colleges to offer a certificate of community interpreting program, and that would be focusing on medical and court. So we would send you all a link and more information when that becomes available. So please keep your ears up, because that is already in the works to put in a program where you can be trained and become certified here in Hawaii. Okay.
Okay, once again, at the last word, thanks everyone for joining us, for spending your Saturday morning with us. I really appreciate, and waiting for our next series of language access. Like Barb said, we're gonna do it every quarter, at least some topic that in your interest. And I know everyone who joined us here today, they also get a confirmation link that have my email address. Feel free if you have any suggestions or any idea what topic or what area that you would like. The Office of Language Access will work in collaboration with like Language Services Hawaii, Safe Haven, Judiciary, or any area that we can address your needs. Just feel free to contact us, and then we will see how we can achieve that goal. But once again, thank you everyone for being with us here today. Have a good day.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Melody. Thank you, everybody.
Bye,
See y'all
everybody.
later.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you.